Okay, we'll begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Natti janang apanyassa panyanatti ajhayato yam hi janang chapanyang cha save nibbana santike. That's the third time you've heard that so far in your retreat. The English is, there is no concentration without wisdom, no wisdom without concentration. One who has both wisdom and concentration is close to peace and emancipation. Every time Bhante Ji ends a meditation period, he chants this. And this particular section of the suttas is very apt for this retreat, which is the Samatha and Vipassana retreat. It's very common these days to see these practices separated or talked about as two separate things, but that's actually not how it was taught by the Buddha of the Pali Canon. So what you're here for this retreat is to learn more about that. So, as Bhante Ji said, today I'm going to be talking about Samatha. Tomorrow we'll have Bhante Ji in here talking about Vipassana, and then Samanera Panyaratana will take it home for us and talk about how they work together on the last day. So I just wanted to first stress that this is a brief overview. The topic of Samatha is very large. And some of the topics I'm going to be going over, we literally have our own retreats just for those topics. So this is going to be, a large topic. It's going to be a lot of information. You don't have to worry about getting all of it down. This is supposed to help you have a basis of understanding what Samatha is. So don't get too worried or too overwhelmed as we go through this. So what is Samatha meditation? It's the practice of calming the mind, the citta, and its sankharas. Sankharas are activities, formations. This is done by practicing single-pointed meditation on one object. Now, and as we focus and concentrate on that one object, we develop deep levels of calm and serenity. Hence why it is often also called serenity meditation, or tranquility meditation. So what about the word itself, samatha? What does it mean? Calm, quietude of mind, cessation of the sankharas, activities of the mind, calming the mind. So samatha meditation was very ancient by the time of the Buddha, who existed 3,000 years ago. So that gives you a little bit of a hint as to how old this practice is. This is a practice that existed before the Buddha. And indeed, about 7,000 years ago, we have in the Indus Valley, which is the valley on the border now between India and Pakistan, we have depictions of people cross-legged with eyes half shut. Look familiar? Okay. So meditation is very old. And we have the first written depictions of it 3,000 years ago. So actually, researchers posit that this kind of meditation was discovered by our ancient ancestors sitting around a fire. So the fire was their object of meditation. So this is a very old practice, and this is a practice that existed before the Buddha. And now it exists in every major religion has a samatha practice. Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hindu, Taoist, any major religion has this practice. Cultures all over the world. And the object that they use is highly dependent on their culture and their religion and all that kind of stuff. So it's come down in the Buddhist tradition over the last couple thousand years that there's 40 meditative objects. I'm not going to go in detail about these. But just to give you kind of an overview of how broad this practice can be. And the 40 meditative subjects, just briefly, and some of these are actually existed before the time of the Buddha as well. There's kasina. Kasinas are little discs that have various colors. Some represent like the elements and things like that. People use that as their point of concentration. If you're familiar with mindfulness of death in Buddhism, we can use the various stages of corpse decay as meditative subjects. The triple gem can be used as meditative subjects: Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. As a matter of fact, in the Thai tradition, one of the basic mantras for basic beginning meditation is using the mantra Buddho. So that's a part of that. Also, generosity and morality can be used. The four elements can be used. Even the four Brahma Viharas, if you're familiar with metta, which is limitless goodwill or loving friendliness. Karuna, which is compassion. Mudita, which is appreciative joy. And upekkha, which is equanimity. Even they can be used as objects in our samatha practice. As a matter of fact, I know a few prominent monks that this is what they use as their main object of practice. But now that I've gone through all of that, the reason I went through all this is to bring you back to the number one most common object is the breath. If you read the suttas, all of these other things are very rarely mentioned, maybe once or twice in thousands of pages. But the Buddha consistently talks about using the breath as our object. And there's a good reason for that. So the breath is a neutral object, just like Bhante Ji was talking about yesterday. This is neutral objects are often objects that we don't notice, right? The breath happens whether we notice it or not. From, like Bhante Ji said, from the time we're born to the day we die, we're breathing. So this is a very good, very preferred object of our samatha practice. So, now that I've given you a little bit about samatha all over the world and all these kind of different practices, let's go into the purpose of samatha meditation in Buddhist practice. So, some of you might be familiar with the story of the Buddha. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about that. But after he did his renunciation and he went into the woods looking for a way out of samsara, the round of rebirth and suffering and all these kind of things, he had two teachers. The first teacher was Alara Kalama. And these were some of the top teachers of the day in samatha meditation and absorption meditations, these kind of things. And so he went to this first teacher, quickly mastered everything the teacher could teach him, and the teacher invited him to become a teacher like him, to share in the his empire, teaching empire. And the Buddha says, no, this is not. I've reached the pinnacle of what you can teach me, but I haven't found my what I'm looking for. And so then he finds another teacher, Udaka Ramaputta, and it's the same thing. He quickly masters what can be taught, but he could not find what he was looking for. Back then, we have in the deep absorption meditations, you can be in these very blissful deep states for days on end, right? So you imagine these guys in their blissful deep states, they come out and they're like, oh, I still have to die. There's still lots of sucky stuff in life. Okay, maybe I'll go back into meditation for a little bit. Right? So people can use that as almost like an escape. The Buddha was looking for an escape, but not that kind of escape. So, and then we obviously, if you know the rest of the story, he went out on his own, was his own teacher, and found the practice of insight. So the goal of samatha in Buddhist practice is as a basis of development for insight. That's the one thing that we want to always keep in mind when we're practicing mindfulness of breathing. When we get into these deep states, we're not doing it for the bliss and the wonderful feeling. We're doing it as a basis, as a vehicle to develop insight. And indeed, the Buddha says this: Bhikkhus develop concentration. A bhikkhu who is concentrated understands things as they really are, i.e., insight, wisdom, They understand the reality of how things are. And so we're going to go into a very famous sutta now, and continuing on my point of using samatha as a basis of for insight. In the beginning of this sutta, the Buddha says this: Bhikkhus, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you ever heard of the 4 Satipatthanas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, this is the Buddha's preeminent teaching on insight. This is the one-way path to the freedom of all beings. So this is, and this is the Buddha right here saying that this mindfulness of breathing can lead to that. When the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated, they fulfill the 7 enlightenment factors. And when the 7 enlightenment factors are developed and cultivated, they fulfill true knowledge and deliverance. It's pretty important stuff, right? You can go pretty far. So what we're going to go over now is the Anapanasati Sutta, very briefly. It's Majjhima Nikaya, number 118. This, along with the Satipatthana Suttas, is the Buddha's teaching, direct teaching on meditation. So what does Anapana mean? It means the inhaled and the exhaled breath. So the full cycle of breathing in, and there's a pause while your chest is full of air, breathing out. Pause while your chest is empty of air. Your lungs are empty of air. That's that Anapana. It's the full cycle of the inhaled and the exhaled breath. And sati is often translated as mindfulness. So hence we get the term mindfulness of breathing. And the Buddha gave 16 steps in this Anapanasati Sutta. These steps go from the very beginning all the way through the jhanas and even in the development of insight. So we're going to go over those steps, but again, it's important, don't worry about memorizing all the steps and trying to, when you're in meditation, which step am I at, and all these kind of things. Don't worry about that. You can, as you progress in your practice and as you learn, you'll see how they fit into the practice. So, now, how is mindfulness of in and out breathing developed and pursued so as to be of great fruit and great benefit? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect, and setting mindfulness to the fore. Always mindful he breathes in, always mindful he breathes out. That's the very basic beginning. Setting mindfulness to the fore, what does that mean? That means putting your concentration, putting your focus on the mindfulness, on full awareness and clear comprehension of your object. So we are setting up mindfulness of our object at this point. And some people say that means you're supposed to set up your object like at the tip of the nose or the lung, the diaphragm, wherever. It doesn't really matter per se. If people, wherever it shows up is where people can set their mindfulness at, or even just understanding, a basic understanding that the breath is there and the parts of the breath. So we go into the first step. And you heard this step last night. Breathing in long, he discerns, I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns, I am breathing out long. So 2 things, as we get started here. First, this is not something that's being forced. This is not something you're doing. You're not saying, okay, now it's time for me to do a long breath. Now it's time for me to breathe out long. That's not how it is. This is just observing the basic characteristics of the breath. And the second thing at this point also is that you're not making a mental note. You're not literally saying in your mind, I am breathing out long. I am breathing in long. It's just a basic, full awareness, basic mindfulness of this process. So the second, or breathing in short, he discerns, I am breathing in short. Or breathing out short, he discerns, I am breathing out short. So we have long breath and short breath, right? These are basic characteristics of the breath. So, I've noticed in my own, as I'm following my breath, sometimes, actually fairly often, and I don't know why, sometimes I'll breathe in deep and I'll breathe out really short, right? So you're not always going to necessarily have breathe in long, breathe out long. So you're paying attention to your breath and these basic characteristics. Number 3, he trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. This one has a little bit of controversy in it, just in that in this sutta, the Buddha actually states that the breath is a body, so it's part of the body. And this third one is translated different ways depending on the teacher. Some people translate it as this sensitive to the entire body of breath. Some people translate it as the whole body. And indeed, Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's the author of the four Nikayas, or at least the translator of the four Nikayas, I should say, from one text to another, he's actually changed what he translated it as. So this is something that is really kind of left up for you to practice and see what works for you. So 4, he trains himself. I will breathe in, calming the bodily fabrications. I will breathe out, calming bodily fabrications. What are these? These are sankharas. These are activities of the body. So you're breathing in and breathing out actively, and you're training yourself. So this goes from, in the beginning we were just understanding. Now we're actually training ourselves. Breathing in, breathing out, calming the bodily fabrications. Yeah. So calming your body. 5, he trains himself. I will breathe in sensitive to rapture. I will breathe out sensitive to rapture. Those of you who might know a little bit about jhana, jhana is, rapture is a jhanic factor. So this is obviously, as we're going down the steps, we're getting deeper and deeper into these more calm states. Okay. Number 6, he trains himself. I will breathe in sensitive to pleasure. I will breathe out sensitive to pleasure. Number 7, he trains himself. I will breathe in sensitive to mental fabrications. Again, the sankharas of the mind, the activities, the thoughts, everything that's going in your mind, being sensitive to that. 8, I will breathe in, calming the mental fabrications. I will breathe out, calming the mental fabrications. 9, I will breathe in, sensitive to the mind. I will breathe out, sensitive to the mind. Number 10, I will breathe in, satisfying the mind. I will breathe out, satisfying the mind. Number 11, I will breathe in, steadying the mind. I will breathe out, steadying the mind. 12, I will breathe in, releasing the mind. I will breathe out, releasing the mind. 13, I will breathe in, focusing on impermanence. Here's where we start to get into some insight. Observing impermanence, understanding impermanence is part of insight. 14, I will breathe in, focusing on dispassion. I will breathe out, focusing on dispassion. I will breathe in, focusing on cessation. I will breathe out, focusing on cessation. I will breathe in, focusing on relinquishment. I will breathe out, focusing on relinquishment. This is how mindfulness of in and out breathing is developed and pursued so as to be of great fruit and great benefits. Did you all memorize all those steps yet? I think one of the best ways to look at this is having a basic good understanding of what these steps are about, and then seeing them in your practice. You instead of being in your meditation really trying to, what step should I do next? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And then that's going the opposite of calming your mind. That's making your mind even crazier. So I went through this as just so that you have a basic understanding of the Anapanasati Sutta. Again, it's Majjhima Nikaya number 118. So this is a sutta that if you are a Buddhist practitioner, that you should definitely become very familiar with, study over the years, listen to trusted teachers and how they teach this, and practice it. Because practicing it is what the Buddha wanted us to do. Okay, so we're going to move into the last factor, or the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is Samma Samadhi, which is often translated as right concentration. Samadhi refers to states that are of very deep calm in meditation. These are the deepest states of calm, the pinnacle of samatha practice. So what does samadhi mean? It comes from the root samma, which means even, equal, level, also calmness and tranquility. So samadhi is also part of the threefold breakdown of the Noble Eightfold Path. Those of you who've been here before, and those of you who just came and who might have been astute, maybe you noticed on the office outside there's a logo with the lotus, and it has Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. That's the threefold breakdown of the Noble Eightfold Path. And Sila is our virtuous practice, practicing morality. You guys took the precepts. That's part of practicing morality. And the way I like to view Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, Samadhi is, we just went over, is deep states of calm, concentration. Panya is wisdom. And so the way I like to view these three is like a pyramid. Using the example of how I was talking about samatha meditation as a base for insight. The bottom base is our virtuous practices, our following the precepts, doing good deeds, avoiding doing unskillful deeds that are harmful. That's the base, and that's the base for our samatha practice, our samadhi practice. If you are doing things that are going to cause you lots of remorse and restlessness and build up a lot of anger and all kinds of issues in your mind, you're not going to be able to concentrate much. And you're certainly not going to be able to get into the deeper levels of concentration. So this is why the Buddha taught it in this way, that this is, Sila is our base, that we have our meditation practice on, our samatha practice, and that is our base to develop insight. So it's just like a pyramid. So we're going to go into jhanas now. What is jhana? Jhana is a meditative state of profound stillness and concentration in which the mind becomes fully immersed and absorbed in the chosen object of attention. So this is continuing with observing and focusing on our object, and this is what it leads to. So again, jhana existed before the Buddha. Indeed, there's a story of the Buddha as a child under a tree attaining first jhana. So we're going to go briefly over the jhanas. There's 8 of them. The first 4 are aptly named 1, 2, 3, and 4. They are the rupa jhanas, the form jhanas. These are the most important jhanas with respect to the development of insight. So these are the ones we're going to go over a little bit more. But there's also 4 other jhanas after that, the arupa jhanas. These are formless jhanas. And just to name them real quick, you have the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of nothingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So now that that's out of the way, let's go into some talk about the four jhanas. We're going to go over the basic paragraph of the Buddha describing the factors of each jhana, and then a simile that he gives. So the first jhana. Bhikkhus, to whatever extent I wish, secluded from sensual pleasures. So what does this mean, secluded from sensual pleasures? It's what you guys are practicing here, right? Practicing your noble silence, practicing your precepts, which are helping you look inward instead of outward. Normally our mind likes to use the senses to go outwards and to have pleasing experiences that we like. So instead, when we're doing jhana, when we're at the point of practicing jhana, we're secluded from these. We're moving inward. So we're secluded from sensual pleasures. Secluded from unwholesome states. These are the 5 hindrances, which we will be going over after we go through the jhanas. I enter and dwell in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination. These two words, vitakka and vichara, they essentially mean the initial application of putting your mind on the object and then keeping your mind on the object. So these are active sankharas, active mental activities of putting and keeping your mind on the object. I enter and dwell in the first jhana, which is accompanied, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Rapture is piti, often also translated as joy, and happiness is sukha. Rapture is a jhanic factor that gives you a feeling of exaltation. It's a feeling that is described in the suttas as a place where meditators can experience pleasurable feeling and pleasurable experience that is far beyond anything of the senses. From ice cream to sex, piti is better than all of that. So this is, and this indeed is, the Buddha talks about when you're able to experience this rapture, then it's much easier to, when you get to that point, you understand that all the pleasures that you went after, going out into the world in your 6 senses, don't match this. So this is this is a joy, this is a feeling of the mind, an inward rapture. And happiness. The happiness comes from the fact that you are secluded from all of these unwholesome states. You're secluded from the feelings of anger and ill will and craving and all of these things. And it's just a very nice feeling of contentment that goes along with the rapture. So, the first simile. Just as if a skilled bathman or a bathman's apprentice would pour bath powder into a brass basin and knead it together, sprinkling it again and again with water, so that his ball of bath powder, saturated, moisture-laden, and permeated within and without, would nevertheless not drip. Even so, the monk permeates, suffuses, and fills this very body with the rapture and pleasure born of withdrawal. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born of withdrawal. Okay, second jhana, with the subsiding of thought and examination. So we'll just stop there real quick. So we had these factors in the first jhana, and we've lost 2 factors. That's a very good indication explaining about how jhana works. We don't try to go out and attain jhana. We're not trying to do anything. We're not trying to force ourselves or control ourselves into jhana. Jhana comes when we set the conditions. And we set the conditions by learning how to let go. And indeed, as we go through the jhanic factors, we see that we are continually going into finer states of mind and letting go of the gross states of mind. So we have, in the first jhana we had this active thought, active concentration on the object of our practice. And now in the second jhana, this has gone away. This is a very gross experience that you don't want anymore, because you're moving into a finer, deeper level of concentration. So with the subsiding of thought and examination, I enter and dwell in the second jhana, which has internal confidence and unification of mind. So at this point, you have a strong confidence and faith in this practice, in yourself, and that you have come to experience this state of attainment. Unification of mind is one way of putting a very strong concentration. So you're getting a stronger concentration as you're going on. So it's without thought and examination, has rapture and happiness born of concentration. So the rapture and happiness is still there, but now it is related to the concentration that you've begun to develop. And indeed, the term noble silence, actually the Buddha calls the second jhana noble silence. So we're practicing noble silence right now, at least you guys are. But this is not the true noble silence. The true noble silence is when the subsiding of thought and examination in the second jhana. This is the noble silence. So, the simile, just like a lake with spring water welling up from within, having no inflow from the east, west, north, or south, and with it the skies periodically supplying abundant showers, so that the cool fount of water welling up from within the lake would permeate and pervade, suffuse and fill it with cool waters. There being no part of the lake unpervaded by cool waters. Even so, the monk permeates and pervades, suffuses and fills this very body with the rapture and pleasure born of composure. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born of composure. So what about the third jhana? With the fading away of rapture. Right? So rapture, this unbelievable exulting feeling that we have, is a gross feeling. We're moving to subtle, fine levels of concentration. Rapture is too much. It's too gross. So we let it go. And indeed, each level, how you get to the next, I should maybe put it a different way of getting to the next level, but how it works is, as you practice each jhana and you master the jhana, you start to see the defaults in it. You start to see that it's not, these are very gross levels of mind. And you start to move yourself towards finer levels of concentration. And indeed, there's also a danger, like I gave you the little example before, of becoming enraptured with these states. Because it's a big danger that you're coming into these jhanas and you're experiencing these amazing states, and you just get blissed out and you just leave it there. But the point of going into jhana in this Buddhist practice is as a basis for development of insight. So that's something that you always have to remind yourself when you're in this, in these states. So, rapture has faded, and now you dwell equanimous and mindful and clearly comprehending. I experience happiness with the body. I enter and dwell in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, he is equanimous, mindful, one who dwells happily. So we've moved away from this overtly gross, amazing happiness, to a wonderful contentment of equanimity. And this equanimity brings a happiness and contentment. So, just as in a blue, white, or red lotus pond, there may be some of the blue, white, or red lotuses which, born and growing in the water, stay immersed in the water and flourish without standing up out of the water, so that they are permeated and pervaded, suffused and filled with cool water from their roots to their tips. And nothing of those blue, white, or red lotuses would be unpervaded by cool water. Even so, the monk permeates and pervades, suffuses and fills this very body with the pleasure free of rapture. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded with the pleasure free of rapture. So the fourth jhana, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain. Feelings of pleasures and pain are abandoned, and with the previous passing away of joy and displeasure, I enter and dwell in the fourth jhana, which is neither painful nor pleasant, and includes purification of mindfulness by equanimity. There is no more pain and no more pleasure felt. You are in an equanimous state. Your mind is purified into an equanimous state. And indeed, the fourth jhana is the best place to develop insight. The fourth jhana is the basis that we can use for the development of insight. This is the state in which we can see very deeply how things work and how things are. And in doing that, we understand, and that is the insight that we develop. So, just as if a man were sitting wrapped from head to foot with a white cloth, so that there would be no part of his body to which the white cloth did not extend. Even so, the monk sits permeating his body with a pure, bright awareness. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by pure, bright awareness. So a few last things for the jhana section. Again, this is a practice of letting go. This is a practice of setting up conditions for these jhanas to appear. You don't go out and grab the jhanas and they come. As you let go, you set the conditions for them to arise. It's an important thing to remember. And indeed, actually, the conditions for the jhana to arise are the suppression or the going away of the hindrances, which we're going to go over. But I wanted to give you guys a simile that when I first heard it, I saw a monk give this simile years ago, really made a deep impression on me and helped me understand better how to work with my meditation practice. And it's called the simile of the cup. So I'm going to use my mug here. This mug is my mind, and I'm a meditator. So, what do we normally do with our mind, with our meditation? We want to hold it. We want to control it. Just like I'm trying to hold this mug up. And I want to still the mind, right? I want to calm the mind. That's the goal of this practice. But as you can see, no matter how hard I try to keep this liquid inside this mug still while I'm holding it, I can't do it. It's not going to get still. And as a matter of fact, my mind's going to get tired and maybe even negative, and then maybe you just throw the cup across the room and go out. I remember how that was in the beginning of my meditation. But what do you do? How do you make the water in this mug still? How do you make your mind still? You put it down. You let it go. Now, of course, at first, it's going to be very wishy-washy and it's going to be all over, but then it goes and it becomes calm. So this is the simile for our mind. This is in letting go, in practicing calming and quieting our mind and our body. We set the conditions for calm and peace to come. And to adopt this simile, some people, they might get the idea But then, so they're waiting and their mind is getting calm, and then they say, oh, well, when is it going to be calm? They keep picking up, when is it going to be calm? Is it calm yet? Right? Because we just have such a hard time letting go. And so letting go and allowing calm to arise is actually part of the meditation practice. So that is the simile of the cup. So we're going to go into our last section, which is the 5 hindrances, or the nivarana. So why are they called hindrances? Well, traditionally they're called hindrances because they hinder our progress. They stop us from getting into calm and peaceful states of mind. And what are these hindrances? The first one is kamachanda, which is sensual desire. We already spoke a little bit about that in the statement of the first jhana, where we're secluded from sensual desire. Sensual desire is the I like mind. I like this. I want to abide in it. I want to hold it so I don't lose it. I want to get more of it. Whether it's people, places, experiences, you like it, you want it, and you want to, and your mind wants to go out and have more experiences because it's a pleasurable experience. The second one is bhayapada, which is ill will. This is the I dislike mind. I don't like, the mind of aversion. I don't want this experience. I don't like this person. I want them to go away. I want to push them away. I want to run away from them. That's ill will. Third is tinna middha, which is sloth and torpor. This is a state of where mind and body are very tired or cloudy mind. Restlessness and remorse, uddaka kukucha. This is the state of a mind that's very full of anxiety. This is a mind that's not in the present. The mind is in the past, going over, having remorse of things that they've done in the past. This is a mind that is in the future, worrying about what's going to happen in the future. And then 5, vicikiccha, which is skeptical doubt. This is doubts about yourself. It's like, oh man, I suck as a meditator. I can't do this. Right? Doubts about the practice itself. Doubts about the Buddha and his path. So and these are not just little doubts. These are very, very strong doubts that actually have an effect on your thinking. And so we can imagine so far that how these 5 might hinder our mind. But what I'd like to say is that instead of thinking of the hindrances as an obstacle, as a hindrance, what do we think? What do we do with obstacles and hindrances? We try to get around them, or we push them out of the way. It's often not a very positive action that we do when we're trying to get rid of these kind of things. What I'd like to say is to view the hindrances as your friends. Why are they your friends? Because the hindrances are showing you where your craving is. The hindrances are showing you where you need to put in work to cleanse your mind. Now the hindrances aren't like uninvited house guests. They're not just showing up, knocking on your door and saying, hey, can we stay? You set the conditions in your mind for these hindrances to arise. You are the cause of these hindrances arising. Right? So instead of trying to push them away, understand how you can be the cause of the hindrances not arising. And that's what we're going to go over here. So in the Samyutta Nikaya, number 4651, the Ahara Sutta, translated as food or nourishment, the Buddha goes over the 5 hindrances, talks about how we nourish them and how we denourish them. So the first one, sensual desire. Nourishment of sensual desire. There are beautiful objects. These are experiences and objects, people, places, whatever that we like. Frequently giving unwise attention to them, this is the nourishment of the arising of sensual desire. So use the, I don't know, example of ice cream or a person or whatever. Oh, I like this ice cream. I want this ice cream. When am I going to have this ice cream? How am I going to have this ice cream? And your mind is going in these thought circles that just keep building up and building up and building up the desire. Same thing if you like a person. It's like, oh, this person is so beautiful or good looking or whatever. Oh, I want to go out with this person. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And so this is because we're paying unwise attention or not paying attention at all. And so this is how we nourish sensual desire in our minds. How do we denourish sensual desire? There are impure objects used for meditation, frequently giving wise attention to them. This is the denourishing of the arising of sensual desire. What does that mean? Use the same examples of ice cream and a person. And as part of our monastic, when we reflect on our requisites, what we use, our food, clothing, shelter, medicines, we reflect that like for food. This food is pleasant as it is, but when used up by the body is not unpleasant, is not pleasant. You might kind of understand what we're talking about. The ice cream is pleasant going in here, but not quite pleasant going out the other way. So you're reflecting on what it is and what it is for. You're breaking the enchantment that your mind has over the object. Same thing with a person. You know, if we have this strong attachment, oh, this person is amazing, so beautiful, and you're just looking at this person and you're just totally obsessed with this person. What do we do, right? The Buddha gives the example of examining the body, understanding the body. What's inside this body, right? We have this wonderful outside view that the body outside is very pleasant, but the body inside is not very pleasant, is it? Right? So you understand what the body is, and that's breaking the enchantment. So this is what the Buddha is talking about in using impure objects for meditation. So there's a simile. If there is water in a pot mixed with red, yellow, blue, and orange color, a man with normal faculty of sight, looking into it, could not properly recognize and see the image of his own face. In the same way, when one's mind is possessed by sensual desire, overpowered by sensual desire, one cannot properly see the escape from sensual desire which has arisen. Then one does not properly understand and see one's own welfare, nor that of another, nor that of both. This is a very important point the Buddha is making, and he's going to make that point for all 5 of the hindrances. That these hindrances not only affect us, but they affect others. They affect others through our actions of mind, body, and speech. Right? When we're filled with ill will, when we're filled with anger, if we act out on that, if we lash out on that, we affect other people. And oftentimes, or most oftentimes, not in skillful and beneficial ways. So, second one, ill will. There are objects causing aversion, i.e. the I dislike mind. Frequently giving unwise attention to them is the nourishment of ill will. You have a person, you're like, oh, I hate that person, I can't believe this person, I have to work with this person, I can't believe this person did what they did, and somebody should do something to this person, I hope this person has a heart attack or has cancer or something like that, right? That is building up ill will. It's being unmindful, and your mind is continually going in these circles, this continual feedback loop of creating more and more ill will in your mind. And I'm sure all of us have the experience of this, and we all know that it's a really crappy feeling to have these kind of feelings, this feeling of anger and ill will. And it's not something that's pleasant at all. So, how do we denourish ill will? There is the liberation of the heart by loving kindness, or metta. Frequently giving wise attention to it, this is the denourishing of ill will. Metta is the direct counteracting of ill will. Metta, the purpose of metta, the practice of metta, is to aid in destroying ill will in our mind. And ill will is one of the three roots, greed, hatred, and delusion, that are the cause of all of our issues. And indeed, the three roots, greed, hatred, and delusion, being eradicated from our mind is awakening, is nibbana. So metta is an extremely important practice in this regard. And ill will is certainly not a small hindrance. It's a very large hindrance. And it can, it goes the whole gamut from just being annoyed to being in full hatred. So similarly, if there is a pot of water heated on the fire, the water seething and boiling, a man with the normal faculty of sight looking into it could not properly recognize and see the image of his own face. In the same way, when one's mind is possessed by ill will, overpowered by ill will, one cannot properly see the escape from ill will which has arisen. One does not properly understand and see one's own welfare, nor that of another, nor that of both. So you can see these similes are all related to a pot of water in different ways that we're not able to see our reflection clearly. These are, the simile of this is the mind is that water. So we can't see clearly when our mind is totally infested by these. Sloth and torpor, my favorite. Nourishment of sloth and torpor. There arises listlessness, lassitude, lazy stretching of the body, drowsiness after meals, mental sluggishness, frequently giving unwise attention to that. This is the nourishment of sloth and torpor. What does that mean? Right? You're in meditation, and you start to get that comfortable feeling of you're going away, right? Tired, tired, tired. Ah, this feels wonderful now. And then you wake up, right? And Bhante Ji said last night, what did he say? Don't fall for that. Don't allow yourself to fall into that trap. So, how do we de-nourish sloth and torpor? There is the element of rousing one's energy, the element of exertion, the element of continuous exertion. So, what does that mean? Right? One of the easiest things to do is, if you really are noticing, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to notice sloth and torpor. In my experience, it's a lot easier to notice restlessness and all these other ones. But sloth and torpor is like a thief in the night, and is all of a sudden you're fine and then you're knocked out. So it's really hard to notice sloth and torpor. But if you are able to notice that you're starting to get tired, what you can do is you can change the object of your meditation. You can redouble your efforts in arousing investigation. When you're interested in something, when you're investigating something, your mind instantly comes back to clarity. So, you can put your mind on various aspects of the breath, or if you have to, change the breath. So you're doing what you can to arouse energy, which is the de-nourishing of sloth and torpor. If there is a pot of water covered with moss and water plants, then a man with normal faculty of sight looking into it could not properly recognize and see the image of his own face. In the same way, when one's mind is possessed by sloth and torpor, overpowered by sloth and torpor, one cannot properly see the escape from sloth and torpor that have arisen. Then one does not properly understand one's own welfare or that of another or both. So restlessness and remorse, nourishment. There is unrest of mind, frequently giving unwise attention to it. That is the nourishment of restlessness and remorse. And again, this is very similar to ill will and sensual desire. Your mind is very anxious. You're worried about, whatever. You're worried about things in the future. How is this person going to react to this? How is my talk going to go? How am I going to be able to make the mortgage payment? All these kind of things, and you're worried about it. And again, it's about being mindful of watching so that your mind doesn't go into those cycles and build up in this endless feedback loop, which creates more and more restlessness and remorse. Denourishing of restlessness or remorse. There is quietude of mind, frequently giving wise attention to it. That is the denourishing of the arising restlessness or remorse. Have you ever meditated and you just notice, wow, my mind is really quiet? And you can actually observe that. You can really concentrate on just the fact that there's no thoughts in your mind. That is taking your mind away. You're taking your mind away from, you're resting your mind away from this endless feedback loop, and you're actually investigating quiet. So, and the more you investigate the quiet, the less likely you are to go into these restlessness and remorse. So, if there is water in a pot stirred by the wind, agitated, swaying, and producing waves, a man with a normal faculty of sight could not properly recognize and see the image of his own face. In the same way, when one's mind is possessed by restlessness and remorse, overpowered by restlessness and remorse, one cannot properly see the escape from restlessness and remorse that has arisen. Then one does not understand one's own welfare, nor that of another, nor that of both. So what about doubt? There are things that cause doubt, frequently giving unwise attention to them. That is the nourishment of doubt. So again, your mind is full of doubt, and you're just allowing it to go on and on and on. This sounds familiar, right? All of these, it's all about the mind. It's all about working with the mind. And it's all about being mindful. The hindrances can arise when we're being heedful and mindful of our mind. The hindrances arise when we're not. When we're being, when we are not paying attention, that's when they sneak in. So, denourishing. There are things which are wholesome and unwholesome, blameless or blameworthy, noble or low, and other contrasts of dark and bright. Frequently giving wise attention to them is the denourishing of doubt. What does that mean? An example is of, you can think about, especially if this is doubt about your own self, about your practice, your ability to do the practice, you can think about the fact that you're here, right? You're here meditating. You're doing a good deed. This is a meritorious good thing that you're doing, that you're trying to practice cleansing and understanding your mind. So when you have doubts, you can think about this, and you could think about the opposite. You could be out doing who knows what, doing all kinds of unskillful things. But you're here, you're doing something good for yourself, and it's good for other people as well, because it's going to be good for the people around you who will not have to worry that you're going to be angry and lash out and these kind of things. So putting your attention, reminding yourself of good things that you've done in the past and good things you're doing now will help with that doubt. And the simile. If there is a pot of water which is turbid, stirred up, and muddy, and this pot is put into a dark place, then a man with a normal faculty of sight could not properly recognize and see the image of his own face. In the same way, when one's mind is possessed by doubt, overpowered by doubt, then one cannot properly see the escape from doubt which has arisen. Then one does not properly understand one's own welfare, nor that of another, nor of both. So the Buddha gives a wonderful simile as to the feeling of when you're free of the hindrances. And he goes on like this. Just as when a man takes a loan, engages in a trade, and his trade succeeds, he now only disposes of his old debt, but he has, beyond that, a surplus for maintaining a family. So you're in debt and you're out of debt. And the feeling, right? He rejoices and he is glad at heart. That feeling of coming out of debt. That's the feeling of when the hindrances are gone. Just as when a man is sick and in pain, suffering from a grave disease, a short time later, he recovers from that sickness. At that he rejoices and is glad at heart. Just as when a man has been thrown into a prison, but sometime later he is released from prison. He is safe and without fears, and at that he rejoices and is glad at heart. Just as when a man is a slave, not independent, but dependent on others, unable to go where he likes, but sometime later he is freed from slavery. and at that he rejoices and is glad at heart. Just as when a man travels through a wilderness where there is no food and much danger, but some time later he crosses the desert and gradually reaches the safety of a village. To that he rejoices and is glad at heart. Similarly, so long as these 5 hindrances are not abandoned in him, a monk considers himself as indebted, as ailing, as imprisoned, as enslaved, as traveling in the wilderness. But when these 5 hindrances are abandoned, he considers himself as free. And it's not that hard as you meditate to just observe your mind and to see, do you have this hindrance or do you not have this hindrance? I'll give an example, a recent example. At one of the Aposita days, which are special days where we do meditation and redouble our practice. About 3 weeks ago, I was in here meditating, and they were actually working on the roof. And it was loud noises and bangs for an hour and a half. Noises and bangs and people yelling and all this kind of stuff. And I can remember a time where I would actually develop a lot of ill will from that. My mind would just keep going all over. But it surprised me to recognize that I had no ill will in my mind while all this crazy noise and loud banging was going on. And I was happy. I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like the practice is actually working. Now, of course, I had a hard time gaining concentration. There were other hindrances there, like sloth and torpor. But this is to recognize when your mind is free of the hindrances is a very good thing, just as good as recognizing when your mind is full of the hindrances. Because when you recognize, then you understand and you're being mindful. You can allow, even though you might notice, okay, I'm really angry, I have a lot of ill will in my mind, but I don't need to allow that to make me do something externally that's going to harm myself or others. So, that's why the Buddha, the simile is so apt. Even if you just see a little bit, let alone when they're all gone and then you're in jhanic state, you just see a little bit when the hindrances are gone. It's a very wonderful, happy, content thing. So, and then this might sound familiar. And when he sees himself free of these 5 hindrances, joy arises. And in him who is joyful, rapture arises. And in him whose mind is enraptured, the body is stilled. The body being stilled, he feels happiness. And a happy mind finds concentration. Right? So this is going into these deep states of meditation, of jhana. So just in closing, everybody, I just wanted to remind you all that we went over a lot of stuff. It's okay that you don't remember every little piece. Really, we went over what's in maybe 2 or 3 suttas. So it's not a lot of information. It's information that you could always look back on in the future as you continue your studying. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to remember everything when you're meditating. When in doubt, go back to the breath. That's what I do. That's what we all do. When in doubt, when you get overwhelmed because you start thinking about all these steps and all this stuff, just go right back to the breath. Keep your mind, keep your focus on the breath, and the rest will follow from there as you learn to let go and set the conditions for all of this to arise. So, and also remember, the purpose of samatha is a basis for insight. This is the reason why we practice this. This is the reason why the Buddha taught in this way, because it's a wonderful basis for developing of insight. And so if anybody has any questions related to meditation or Buddhism in general or Dhamma, feel free to put your questions in the box. I'll do my best to answer them. And if I can, I'll answer to the best of my ability. So thank you. Take a break and come back for meditation.